So, today we're going to talk about something fascinating. It's this hidden framework, almost like a psychological blueprint that powers the products you literally can't imagine your life without. And no, it's not about flashy features or some clever marketing trick. It's something much, much deeper. We're talking about the architecture of commitment.
All right, let's start with a hard truth. One that, honestly, most businesses would rather just ignore. Picture this. The very second a new customer signs up for your product, the instant their payment clears, they are not celebrating. No way. They are second-guessing everything. Their brain is on high alert, flooded with buyer's remorse, and they are actively searching for the exit sign. They're looking for any tiny little reason, any small hiccup that confirms that one nagging fear. I made a mistake.
And right there, that moment exposes what you might call the transaction illusion. And honestly, it's probably the single biggest misunderstanding in business today. For decades, we've all been trained to see the sale, the transaction, as the finish line, right? That's the win. But it's not. It's not the end of the journey at all. It is the fragile, super uncertain start of a trial run. And let's be real, in today's world of endless options, that trial is over almost before it even begins.
So this brings us to a huge paradox. You know how the tech world is completely obsessed with frictionless everything? One-click signups, instant access, all that stuff. Well, there's a hidden trap. See, the easier you make it for someone to start, the easier you make it for them to quit. It's what we call unearned ease. Think about it. When a user has invested absolutely nothing, no time, no effort, not even a bit of their brain power, there's literally zero cost for them to just leave. They're just a visitor, a tourist passing through. What we need to do is turn that tourist into a resident, someone who actually has skin in the game. And that's going to require a total shift in how we think about this.
Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We've touched on the transaction illusion. Next up, we'll dive into why this all became so critical with the Great Collapse. Then, we'll break down the machine that makes it all work, the investment engine. After that, we'll get into the human side of things with the psychology of effort, followed by the practical playbook, the architecture of entrenchment. And we'll wrap it all up with the big idea, the pull toward value.
So, first up, the Great Collapse. You might be wondering, why did this whole way of thinking become so important so suddenly? Well, this isn't just some clever new business tactic. It's a full-on survival strategy, and it was born out of a massive shift in the digital world.
Okay, so for decades, big established companies had this secret weapon, right? It was inertia, basically switching costs. Your data was trapped in their systems. Moving everything, your customer list, your project files, your whole history, was a gigantic, expensive pain. It was like a comfortable prison. You stayed not because you loved it, but because leaving was just too hard. But then, a few years back, especially with AI and new tools, those prison walls just crumbled. That protective moat that kept the giants safe, it completely evaporated. We call this the switching cost collapse. The result was a shock to the system. Churn rates went through the roof, even for the best products out there. Suddenly, the barriers to leaving were just gone.
This collapse forced everyone to rethink their entire strategy. I mean, the old metrics just didn't cut it anymore. User satisfaction, a high net promoter score, that stuff became the bare minimum. Happiness is great, but it's temporary when your competitor is one click away. The new game, maybe the only game, was user investment. The smartest folks in the industry realized something huge. AI can move your data, sure, but it can't transfer your effort. It can't move the hours you spent setting up your perfect workflow. And so the goals shifted. It wasn't just about serving the user anymore, it was about becoming a part of them, indispensable.
All right, section 3, the investment engine. So if user investment is the new gold standard for loyalty, how do you actually earn it? Well, it definitely doesn't happen by accident. It's engineered. And that brings us to the core mechanism we're talking about today, the investment engine. Now, this isn't some single trick or a slick onboarding screen. It's a whole system, a process designed to methodically, step-by-step, deepen a user's commitment to you.
So, how does this engine work? It's all about escalating commitment. Think of it like a ladder. Each step you take, each rung you climb, represents a deeper psychological investment. It's got 4 key stages. We start small with the micro yes. Then we get to the really critical part, the IKEA moment. After that, we make it social with a public declaration. And the final stage, the ultimate goal, is network entrenchment. Let's break each one down. First up, the micro yes. The journey doesn't start with some huge ask. It starts with something so small, so easy, that it's almost impossible to say no.
You've seen this a million times. Choose your theme, pick one goal, select your interests. These feel like nothing, right? Just simple personalization. But psychologically, they're incredibly powerful. Every one of those tiny yes answers is a tiny commitment. It's the classic foot in the door technique, getting you into a pattern of saying yes from the very first second.
Okay, next up is maybe the most important stage of all, the IKEA moment. This is the pivot point. This is where a user stops just consuming and starts creating. You have to get them to build something, not just click around and look at features, but to invest their own labor. Maybe it's creating their first project in a tool or designing their first little graphic. This is the moment their effort gets tangled up with your product. It's their first real investment of sunk cost, time, and energy that makes walking away suddenly feel like a real loss.
So, once they've put in their own work, the third stage kicks in, making that investment social. We call it the public declaration. You give them easy ways to show other people they're committed. Think about inviting a coworker to a shared document, or sharing a project board with your team. Suddenly, it's not just your private tool anymore, it's a choice you've made in public. And now your reputation is on the line. To switch now doesn't just affect you, it inconveniences other people, and it kind of makes you look like you made a bad call. And that brings us to the final stage, the end game, network entrenchment. This is the ultimate moat. This is where your product stops being a personal tool and becomes the actual glue holding an entire team or even a whole company together. Think about Slack for communication or GitHub for code. At this point, leaving isn't even a personal choice. It's a massive, painful organizational decision. It would mean ripping out the foundations of how everyone works. The cost to switch becomes absolutely astronomical, not in money, but in pure, unadulterated chaos and disruption. All right, Section 4, the psychology of effort. So we've seen the what and the how of this engine, but to really get why it's so powerful, we have to look under the hood. We have to understand the human psychology that makes this whole thing tick. Why does this stuff work on us so well? The answer is all about these deep, sometimes totally irrational biases that are just hardwired into our brains.
So let me ask you a question. Why is it that we value the wobbly, imperfect table we built ourselves way more than the flawless, professionally made one we bought at a store? I mean, it makes no logical sense, but we all do it. Why? Well, the answer is baked right into our neurology. It's an evolutionary thing where effort and value were once directly tied to survival.
This comparison really gets to the core of it. Look, a chair you buy from a store, it's just a chair. It's an object with a price. You can replace it tomorrow. But a chair you build? Oh, that is a completely different story. You gave up a Saturday for that chair. You wrestled with those confusing instructions. You put your own sweat and frustration into it. It's not just a chair anymore, it's a story. It's your chair, and it has a personal value that you just can't put a price tag on.
And this, my friends, has a name. It's called the IKEA effect. It's a real, documented cognitive bias, where we put a ridiculously high value on things that we helped create, even just a little bit. And that is exactly what's happening when a user puts effort into your software. Every time they set up a custom dashboard or build a personal template, it's like they're tightening one more screw on their own piece of furniture. They are literally turning your product into their product.
But wait, there's another layer to this, a psychological force that's maybe even stronger. It's the little conversation we have inside our own heads after we've invested all that time. Imagine a user thinking this, okay, I've spent literally 10 hours setting up this system. My brain cannot, it will not admit that this new competitor is better. Because if I admit that, it means I just wasted 10 hours of my life. And our brains will do almost anything to avoid feeling that kind of regret.
This internal struggle has a name too. It's called cognitive dissonance. It's that incredibly uncomfortable feeling you get when your actions, like I spent all weekend setting this up, clash with a new piece of information, like, that other product looks way easier. So to get rid of that mental pain, our brain does something amazing. It performs this little act of psychological self-defense. Instead of admitting we made a mistake and wasted our time, which really hurts our ego, we do something much easier. We change our beliefs. We start to subconsciously amplify how great our chosen product is. We focus on its strengths and completely ignore its weaknesses. We literally convince ourselves that our choice was brilliant all along, not because it's objectively true, but because it protects us from the painful feeling of being wrong.
Okay, next up, the architecture of entrenchment. We've got the psychology down. Now for the big question, how do we actually put this to work? It's time to go from theory to practice. This is the playbook for building these ideas right into your product.
So it really comes down to 3 key actions you need to take. First, you have to map the labor ladder. This is a huge mindset shift. Stop asking, how can we make this zero effort? And start asking, what's the right sequence of small, meaningful efforts? You've got to chart that path from a passive user to an invested one. Second, you have to engineer the IKEA moment. This can't be an accident. You have to intentionally design your onboarding so that every single new user builds something valuable for themselves right away. That is your number one goal. And third, implement the social lock. As soon as they've put in that personal effort, you give them super easy, compelling ways to bring their team and their work into the system. You make your product the hub of their world.
So how do you measure success here? How do you know if this is actually working? You need a new metric. Forget all the vanity metrics. You need to focus on one thing, your replacement friction score. And that means asking a brutally honest question. If one of your users decided to leave today, right now, how much of their own valuable invested work would they lose forever? If the answer is not much, if they can just export their data and get set up with a competitor in under an hour without losing anything important, well then your moat is a mirage, it's not real. The goal is to make their investment so deep that the very thought of starting over somewhere else is just exhausting. Okay, so let's bring this all home, the last section, the pull toward value. We've gone through the whole story, the history, the mechanics, the psychology, the application. So after all that, what's the one big idea you should walk away with? Let's boil it all down to its core.
You know, the business case here is obvious. Less churn, more revenue, that's all great. But the human truth behind why this works is so much simpler and honestly a lot more profound. At our core, we're all just looking for meaning. We are wired to value the things we pour ourselves into. We have this deep, deep need for our effort, our time, our work to actually mean something. So when you build a system like this, you're not really trapping users. You're giving them a place to invest their potential, and you're validating that their effort matters.
And that really changes how we should think about growth entirely. Growth isn't linear, it's learned. The best marketing doesn't push people through a funnel, it pulls them toward value.